Hello everyone, I am Evely, and today I'm going to tell you a story. Enjoy your viewing. The storm hit on a Thursday. It was a storm unlike any other the small town of Chatterfield had ever seen, one that seemed almost too perfect in its ferocity. It came from nowhere, with winds that howled and crackled like living things, tearing down trees and sending debris through the streets. But the true horror lay not in the storm's violence, but in the quiet that followed. For hours, the town had been enveloped in chaos. But once the winds calmed, the sky remained overcast, and the thunder no longer rumbled. A heavy, suffocating stillness hung in the air. As the people of Chatterfield emerged from their homes, the eerie calm began to feel like something more. It was as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting. And then it happened. At the edge of town, near the old quarry, a strange object had appeared. A large, oblong shape that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. It was as though the sky itself had torn open and deposited the thing onto the earth. No one saw it land, nor had anyone heard the impact. But it was there, unmistakable, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. It was an artifact, and though none of the people present could have known it at the time, it would be the beginning of the end. The first to arrive were the beings themselves. They appeared from the shadows of the artifact, tall, slender figures dressed in iridescent robes that shifted in the light. They moved gracefully, effortlessly, as though they were part of the air itself. Their faces were smooth and featureless, their eyes a solid black that seemed to absorb the surrounding world. They looked human in a way, but there was something terribly wrong about them. Their movements were too fluid, their skin too pale, and their presence too alien to be mistaken for anything other than what they truly were. The people of Chatterfield watched from a distance, frozen with fear and awe. But to their surprise, the beings did not seem hostile. Instead, they waved, beckoning the townspeople toward them with outstretched hands. There was a strange calmness to their gestures, as though they were welcoming long-lost friends rather than invaders from another world. Dr. Olivia Westbrook, a local archaeologist who had been studying the ruins nearby, was the first to approach them. She was a woman of reason, and though the situation was unusual, her curiosity outweighed her fear. As she approached the artifact, the beings seemed to observe her with a kind of interest, like scientists studying an unfamiliar creature. "You're not from here," she said cautiously, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. One of the beings nodded slowly, its black eyes reflecting nothing. "No," it replied, its voice a strange, musical sound that seemed to echo in her mind rather than her ears. "We are travelers, seekers of knowledge. We have come in peace." The townspeople gathered, unsure of what to do, but their fear was slowly replaced by curiosity. If these beings meant no harm, perhaps they were the key to something incredible. And so, in small groups, they approached the artifact and the aliens that stood near it, waiting to hear what they had to say. Over the next few days, the aliens shared their knowledge with the people of Chatterfield. They spoke of distant galaxies, of civilizations far older than humankind. They described technologies that seemed almost magical to the locals, devices that could heal the sick, cures for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. The aliens were not only benevolent but eager to help, offering to share their advanced technologies in exchange for something simple: trust. At first, the people of Chatterfield were hesitant, but the promise of peace, of an end to their struggles, was too tempting to ignore. They began to form a tentative alliance with the aliens, allowing them to work alongside the town's scientists and engineers. The artifact, it seemed, was some kind of conduit, a bridge between their world and the alien races, one that allowed them to communicate across vast distances of space. But there were cracks in the foundation, subtle signs that not everything was as it seemed. Dr. Westbrook began to notice small things, strange inconsistencies in the aliens' behavior. When they spoke, their words would sometimes fall into strange patterns, as though they were not entirely in control of their language. Their eyes, black and deep as pits, would occasionally flicker with an emotion that did not belong, an unspoken hunger that chilled her to the bone. Then came the first incident. A local farmer, Edgar Barnes, had been one of the first to volunteer to receive one of the alien medical treatments. He had suffered from a long-standing illness, a debilitating affliction that no human doctor could cure. When the aliens offered their assistance, he was eager to be healed. It started innocently enough. The aliens used a strange device, a glowing sphere, to scan his body. Edgar seemed to feel no pain, only a gentle warmth that spread through him. He was told that he would be better within a few days, and for the first time in years he felt hopeful. But as the days passed, Edgar changed. His demeanor shifted. His face became gaunt, and his skin grew pale, unnaturally pale. The people of Chatterfield, who had once welcomed the aliens with open arms, now began to whisper in fear. Edgar's condition worsened, and no matter how much the aliens tried to intervene, nothing seemed to reverse the damage they had caused. One night, Edgar was found wandering the streets of Chatterfield, his eyes wide and unblinking, his mouth open in a soundless scream. His body trembled violently. His skin cracked and split as though something was trying to break free from within. The townspeople gathered, horrified by the sight, but the aliens were quick to intervene. They tried to calm Edgar, to heal him once more, but it was too late. With one final, agonizing shriek, Edgar's body erupted into something monstrous. His flesh stretched and twisted, warping into an unnatural shape. His limbs lengthened, his hands becoming claws. The townspeople backed away in terror as Edgar's transformation continued, his once human features distorting into something alien, something horrific. His skin turned a sickly green, and from his back, wings sprouted, jagged and torn. The aliens moved forward, but instead of offering comfort, they stood frozen. Their black eyes locked on the creature that had once been Edgar Barnes. And in that moment, Dr. Westbrook understood. The aliens hadn't come to help humanity. They had come to experiment, to learn, to feed. As Edgar, now a grotesque version of his former self, lunged at the crowd, the true nature of the aliens was revealed. They had not come in peace. They had come for something far darker. The storm had only been the beginning. The town of Chatterfield had fallen silent after Edgar's transformation. The eerie calm from days earlier had returned, but now it was more oppressive than ever. People stood frozen, eyes wide in terror, watching as the once human creature stalked the streets, its grotesque wings flapping as it tore through houses, shrieking in a voice that no longer resembled anything human. The air felt thick, heavy, as though the very ground beneath their feet had turned against them. The aliens, who had once appeared so benevolent, now stood motionless, their dark eyes fixed on the creature. They did not intervene. Instead, they observed, as though this was precisely what they had expected. And in that moment, the true horror of their intentions became clear. The creature, what remained of Edgar, howled again, and its claws raked across the walls of a nearby home, sending shards of wood and glass flying into the street. The people of Chatterfield were paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend what was happening. Dr. Westbrook, however, was not so easily fooled. She had seen the signs, the strange behavior of the aliens, their evasive answers, their reluctance to explain their true purpose. Everything had been a lie. They had never come to help humanity. They had come to harvest. The transformation was not accidental. Edgar had been a test subject, and now he was the proof of their true nature. The townspeople, their hope and trust shattered, began to panic. Some screamed, while others ran for cover. But there was nowhere to hide. The aliens moved quickly, surrounding the town, their forms flickering in and out of sight like shadows in the corner of the eye. "Stay inside," Dr. Westbrook shouted to the others. "Don't let them near you." But it was too late. The aliens had already begun their work. The first to go was Mayor Thomas Caldwell, who had been one of the most outspoken advocates for the Alien Alliance. He had promised the townspeople that these visitors would bring them prosperity, that their technology would cure disease and improve life in ways they couldn't imagine. He had trusted them completely, and now, as he tried to flee from the chaos, he was dragged back by a dozen alien tendrils that materialized from thin air, wrapping around his body with terrifying precision. Dr. Westbrook watched, helpless, as the mayor's screams were muffled by the tendrils, his body contorting unnaturally as the aliens began to disassemble him. The process was brutal and swift. His arms and legs were twisted backward, his face distorted as though pulled by invisible strings. She could hear the sickening cracking of bones as his body was reconfigured, his organs pulled free and replaced with strange, unfamiliar machinery. The aliens were not here to help. They were here to replace, to remake. A few seconds later, what remained of Mayor Caldwell was a lifeless husk, his body hanging limp in the air as the aliens retreated, satisfied. But they did not stop. They moved from house to house, their black eyes scanning the inhabitants, searching for those who were still alive, still untainted by the changes that had begun to spread across the town. Dr. Westbrook had to act fast. She had no idea how the aliens were doing it, how they were transforming the people so quickly, turning them into mindless creatures with grotesque forms, but she knew one thing. If they didn't stop the artifact, if they didn't destroy it, Chatterfield would be lost. As she made her way toward the quarry, where the artifact still stood, she saw the first signs of the transformation in the townspeople who had been exposed to the aliens' influence. They were no longer human. They moved like puppets, their bodies jerking and twitching in unnatural ways. Their eyes were empty, their minds consumed by whatever force had overtaken them. They were becoming them. She turned back, her heart pounding in her chest. But the alien forms, now fully revealed in their horrific true state, were closing in. Their bodies shimmered like liquid, their movements no longer fluid, but jagged, almost predatory. They began to march toward her with an unyielding purpose, their eyes locked on her. There was no escape. Dr. Westbrook's thoughts raced. The artifact had to be destroyed. But how? She couldn't take it down alone, and the aliens seemed to be impervious to any form of attack. Then she remembered something she had seen in the artifact's glow. A pattern. A frequency that hummed like a heartbeat. Maybe it wasn't just a physical object. Maybe it was more than that. Her fingers trembled as she approached the glowing artifact, now hovering a few feet above the ground. She could feel its pull, a subtle hum that seemed to resonate in her chest. The air around it felt thick, almost alive, as though the thing itself were feeding on the fear that surrounded it. The town, the people, everything. But as she reached toward it, she was stopped. A voice echoed in her mind, low and heavy, like 1,000 whispers. You should not have come. It wasn't spoken aloud. It was a thought, no, a command. A force that seemed to rip through her consciousness, silencing everything else. Dr. Westbrook's hand wavered in midair, the terror rising in her chest. And then, as though an invisible hand had reached inside her mind, she understood. The artifact was not just a bridge between worlds. It was a vessel, a prison. And it was not merely bringing the aliens here. It was calling them. The beacon had been activated, and the invasion had begun. The town of Chatterfield was just the beginning. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The sky overhead cracked open, revealing a swarm of alien ships descending from the heavens. They were massive, incomprehensible in their design, towering structures that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. It was too late. The invasion had begun. Dr. Westbrook turned, but the aliens were already there, their long, sharp limbs closing in. They no longer appeared as peaceful travelers, but as the nightmarish predators they truly were. The transformation was accelerating. People who had once been neighbors, friends, loved ones, were now twisted parodies of themselves. Half human, half alien, mindless and savage. The artifact pulsed once more, its light flashing brighter than ever before. And as the first wave of alien invaders set foot on the earth, the true horror of their mission became clear. They had not come to conquer. They had come to consume. And now the invasion was inevitable. See you in the next video. Don't forget to support me.